All right, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Friday. Start of the weekend here is upon us. It is Friday, October 3rd, 2025, 12:22 p.m. That's California time here. Latest activity shows a 1.6 up into the Alaska area. There in the green flag. Also some larger movement there across the Kamchatka area. They had a 6.1 earthquake this morning, about 9 o'clock or so, a couple hours ago. As you can see, things are definitely ramping up there. Now, whether this is just, simply aftershock activity from the 8.8 that struck back here in this same location back in the end of July, or maybe we're in the process of seeing another large quake out here. There is some further movement down south here along this area of concern because, along this area of the subduction zone, that is of some concern because of the potential for, well, just as large of an event as what we've seen back in July. Now, the 8.8 ruptured a fairly lengthy portion here of the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. There's a subduction zone that you can see quite nicely on the oceanic crust map. But that only partially released the strain out here along the Kamchatka. There's still a couple areas up north and also down south here that are capable of producing megaquakes. And watching this closely here, because the sequence of events there are still kind of a little on the elevated side this far down the road from that 8.8 that struck back there in July. We'll cover the rest of the world earthquake activity here in a minute. I do want to talk about movement into Northern California. This is happening north of me today. Had a 3.4 earthquake outside of Anderson, Cottonwood area, Redding, California. This is at the northern end of the Sacramento Valley. That, not too many earthquakes are up here in this location. One would think normally around the San Andreas Fault or the Cascadia subduction zone, but we do have a fault system up here called the Battle Creek Fault. It's a mix of different types of fault activity here. There is some thrust fault here along this area, and if you look, this pretty much runs opposite of what the normal faulting does here across California, which is normally your north to south or northwest to southeast type movement, as you can see there on this area. So this is kind of a more of a west-eastward direction there on the fault with some uplift, with some thrust going on. Now, there's not a whole lot of large historical data when it comes, or large earthquake activity in terms of historical data here in this region. I did find that the accumulated slip rate here in this area is, it runs really low. I think it's about 0.5 mm, so not even a millimeter. This is a 0.5 in a year. So the slip rate out here is extremely low. This here is just for comparison. If you look at the general plate stress accumulation here in a year, for example, up in the Aleutian Trench, you got 60 mm per year. This here is 0.5 mm, so not even one. It's just a little fraction. And that's probably why we can't find a whole lot of larger earthquake activity here historically. But there is still some concern here, even if this thing is capable of producing a 6, which from the information I found, it could be around a 6 or so, maybe a little bit higher in this area. Just looking at the accumulated slip rate and the type of faulting that's out here. The concern here is that it's really close, within about 10 to 15 miles or so of Shasta Dam, which is it holds back a lot of water up there in Shasta Lake. And that would not be good if we had a bigger event really close to this dam, because all that water would come down and flood the Sacramento Valley, which would not be good because I live down here. And it would probably make it all the way down here to the Willows area, but it would follow mainly across, the lower land regions where the Sacramento Valley runs through. But anyway, we do have some earthquake activity ramping up on here this morning. It did not start off with a 3.4. It actually started off with a 1.9. The 3.4 is just the largest so far in this sequence of events out here. Now, that's a concerning thing because there was no main quake followed up by aftershock activity. In the last week, one more earthquake up here over Redding, near Redding. Over the last 30 days, looks like there's been a handful of smaller quakes in the area as well. But nothing is what we've seen here today, which of course is at 3.4. So that's I'm watching this here closely. I did pull up, though, the historical model along the Battle Creek Fault system. There's a lot here, right? But this goes back to, I pulled up the year 1000. Doesn't mean it's going to cover everything here, but it does have some activity where we're seeing the earthquake activity today. The Battle Creek Fault, excuse me, runs about here. You can kind of see it. Let me see if we got it. Should be up here on the map. Put this in miles for one. Where's our... Yeah, the faults are up there, but how come it's not showing? Probably just too many earthquakes in here. That's exactly right. But the Battle Creek Fault, you can see a portion of it right there. So zooming in here, and that's going to be this area right here. You can kind of see that land lifting up, a little ridge there. Earthquake activity today, right there in the red and orange. As far as largest magnitudes, at least in recorded history. Now remember, I believe this fault system here is capable of producing a much bigger earthquake. It just periodically sees activity like we're seeing right now. It looks like a 4.4 struck here, a little bit further south though, in 1997. There's a 4-pointer further to the southwest in 1999. So activity all over the place, but specifically right here on the Battle Creek Fault. There's a 3.4 2008 and a couple other smaller events here, but all this other activity we're seeing away from the area is just other faults that are in the region here. But there is some concern, folks, that this region is capable of producing a larger event. Now, the wording in here is actually interesting here. It's a system of closely parallel faults that run between the coast ranges and near the town of Cottonwood. Battle Creek Fault Zone is a system of closely parallel faults, so they're stating that maybe it runs further to the west. That's what it sounds like. Faulting action is normal vertical motion. Obviously, with the terrain to the south lower than the terrain to the north. Look at this right here. Although there has been no earthquakes in historic times, it is believed that the fault zone may still be active and has been determined to be the closest active and possibly hazardous fault to the Shasta Dam. And yeah, this is what I mentioned here earlier about the fault being opposite of what we normally see out here. So these thrust faults may accumulate, strain in a long time period, I should say. It takes probably thousands and thousands of years to build up strain out here, and it's very possible with them not being able to find historical large earthquake activity out here because so much time has passed, like a lot, thousands of years, that we may be entering into a time where that could, possibly be waking up out here. I'm gonna have to watch this closely. It is a little scary. I guess this 3-pointer was felt in the area. I was trying to sleep this morning. In fact, I tried to sleep in a little bit later this morning because we had a huge round of thunderstorms move through here about 2 to 5 in the morning. I could not get any sleep. We're not used to that here in Northern California. It just doesn't happen all that often. So when it does, it can keep you awake. I'm sure a lot of people out east and in the typical thunderstorm zones are used to it, but yeah, these were some window shakers, floor rattlers. They were big ones. But yeah, it looks like around, outside of Anderson, but there was also someone reporting, I think it was maybe in one of my comments here on the video, about an earthquake there in Chico. I didn't feel it. I was sleeping. If it struck, I probably thought it was the thunder rolling through. Well, that struck at about 6:34 this morning. And the last quake on here, just within the hour, a 2.3. So we do have some adjustment going on here, folks. And the Battle Creek Fault here, like I say, there's not a whole lot of there's a lot of information on it, when it comes to the faulting that's around the area and the slip rate, but far as anything of magnitude wise. But I'm coming up with that number there of a 6-pointer just because of the way as to how lengthy that fault system is, and comparing it to other faults of that similar type of faulting. There's a lot, like I say, there's a lot of technical information here talking about the slip rate. on various systems nearby, but no given magnitudes out here. And I looked over quite a bit of this, but maybe if anyone else has some information out there on this, I can't find it. But I'm assuming here that that's capable of a larger earthquake, more than just a 3.4. And the time, like I said, the time it takes there to build up some strain, probably thousands of years, and there's been no historical documentation on a big earthquake out here. But obviously, it has to be able to produce a sizable event. So watching that closely, it is, I think, just a sign here. I mean, there's really nothing going on here across Northern California, the coastline right now. But I do believe pressurization is at its maximum out here across the Cascadia and the San Andreas Fault. And we normally see a lot of earthquake activity inland. For example, Ridgecrest area gets a lot of movement. You start seeing swarms out here across western Nevada, and all that pressure and stuff that's been building up out here, it does show inland at times here. Got a little swarm out there in Nevada around Tonopah, a couple 2s and some 1s. But I'm watching that closely. That's literally just up the road from me here in Chico. One earthquake there on the San Andreas Fault right now. That's a 2.2. The Hayward Fault quiet for now. Southern California, not a whole lot showing up down there. There is one earthquake of a 3.2 magnitude report there at 2 o'clock this morning off of the San Jacinto Fault zone. In between the San Jacinto and the Elsinore Fault, it looks like. It may actually be on a little fragment there of the Elsinore Fault. That's this little earthquake down here. But aside from that, Southern California, a little spotty. Just watching the northern end here. And, of course, the Cascadia subduction zone. Up into Washington, yesterday we had a number of earthquakes up there. I definitely wanted to cover this more, but a storm literally popped up right at the beginning of my update, and my dog was out, and he does not like lightning and thunder. He was going crazy. I didn't want him to take off, so I had to cut the update short last night. Let's see if we got anything further overnight here. There's some earthquake activity away from the volcanoes there, but see this earthquake right here at Mount Rainier from yesterday. That's a 2.2. Pretty shallow, but also one of the more larger ones that we've seen in that swarm of activity here. Let me go back and go to the Trimmer map here real quick in the Mount Rainier seismograph station here. Now, last 2 days, I'm seeing that 2.2 show up here. That was from yesterday, but it's not here. Right, last 2 days should be an orange circle. It looks like they took that off for some reason, but it did show up here from yesterday. We'll have to go back to the UTC time of yesterday. Actually, no, we don't, because it's still covering it. That's going to be this earthquake right here. Now, it looks a little odd. I wonder if that was maybe a rock fall, but that would be one heck of a rock fall to make a 2.2 magnitude reading. But it did show up here on this seismograph station, also the other one as well that's nearby. It does appear that earthquake activity, though, is increasing here. I noticed that prior to that earthquake as well. Looks like, see these little spikes out here? Quite a bit of them here recently. Let me go to the previous time. I was thinking maybe it was this reading here that happens every 24 hours or so, but it's not. That doesn't match, the time period where there's always a blip like that every 20 to 24 hours or so. But that's the 2.2. These have to be earthquakes out here, and it definitely looks like they're picking up a little bit here. Again, nothing. I do like to show this because it's in comparison. Nothing compared to what we've seen back in July when the swarm was ongoing. This is July 9th. There at Mount Rainier, we had hundreds of earthquakes each day. Yeah, it lasted for a little while. It's died down, but I do believe that we're still seeing that swarm continue. Just not as intense there. A couple more overnight, but really nothing since that 2.2. being reported up there. And the USGS is reporting it, but it looks like they removed it there from the PNSN network. Mount St. Helens definitely seen some earthquake activity as well. That looks like a nearby, well, nearby, but somewhat at a distance from the seismogram here. Let's see what we got down there across Mount St. Helens. See, there was this one at, this one was at 325 this morning, a little 0.4. 325. This is Mount St. Helens. It is up at the dome. 325 would be technically right here, maybe one of these little marks. You know, if that's one, then what about all these other ones that are showing up here? I just don't get that. Let me see here. This one was right up at the summit to the south, though. That's a little 0.1 at 4 o'clock this morning. Exactly at 4 o'clock. Right? Yeah, 4 o'clock. So he's not even showing up here. It's a little odd. So I don't know. It's really weird. And what's this event right here? That's about 9 o'clock or so, 9:30. Nothing showing up here in the area. Nothing nearby. Oh, you know what? Let me see here. 9:30 in the morning. I don't think it would have picked this one up. No, there was nothing at 9:30. So the thing is, there's definitely still some earthquake activity happening and some questionable lack of reporting out here. You know, if they're going to say this is going to be a little earthquake, what about all these other ones that look identical? Some larger. So it's just a little odd. So that's why I keep kind of keeping tabs on that. Mount Hood. Let's go see what's going on up there at Mount Hood. I know nothing really being reported, but this has been another area of increased earthquake activity. Not as much as Mount St. Helens or Mount Rainier, but it's starting to look like it, isn't it? That's what I would say. Those are earthquakes. That's a definite localized event. All these are earthquakes as well. I mean, let's see what these guys are reporting. So just after 12:30 last night, there was almost a 1 magnitude. That was a 0.9. So that should show up, right? 12:30. This is all kind of haywire looking, but 12:30 would be roughly, I'm thinking it would be this blue line or maybe the black line right here, the black blip. So if that's a 0.9 and these events are bigger, how come these aren't showing up? Why aren't these showing up on the graph here? Why is that not getting reported? You guys see all those? What about this one? That's larger than all of them. That has to be, if you really think about it, that's a 0.9, barely showed up on the graph, so that's got to be maybe above a 1. The lines here are from the 6.1 that struck there in Russia earlier this morning. That would match the S-wave travel time, and it definitely showed up there. So the seismograph station here is working appropriately, and it's picking up events at a distance, far as vibrational frequency goes, excuse me, and also the localized earthquake activity. But nothing really being reported out here aside from a little bitty one. That, you know, but it'd be crazy if you actually reported all of the events. You would see a whole bunch of earthquakes across 3 volcanoes here. Excuse me. Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier. Mount Adams is another one that's, they've had a little bit of earthquake activity, but it's really not all that monitored, you know. For a major volcano, they only got 1 seismograph station out here, and it's away from the summit. Man. So let's see if this is actually picking up anything. I don't see anything, but again, if there's some light microquake activity going on up at the summit area, then it more than likely may not show at this distance here. But all I know is definitely some earthquake activity stirring up out across the Pacific Northwest and a number of those volcanoes across the Cascades. Mount Shasta down here, that's a ways away. That's the activity there with the Battle Creek Fault. Mount Shasta sits way up north here. Mount Lassen is over here to the east. But let me go see here. We can spot the USGS site, volcano hazards. I just want to check Mount Shasta here real quick, see if there's anything stirring up there. Are they working? Maybe not. Maybe they're offline. I don't think it's me. No, definitely not me. But it looks like the USGS volcano site's offline for some reason. It shouldn't just sit there and spin like that. I've got a pretty darn fast connection out here. Hello. Yeah, that's... Oh. Well, you know, that could be an excuse, right? Could be. With it being shut down there, as far as the the government stuff. I don't like to talk about that stuff on here, and I won't. But this only happened recently, and there's still been a lot of earthquake activity with the lack of reporting. But let's just go see. I'm definitely glad that we can go out here and look at these seismograph stations there ourselves, and just see what's going on there, as far as any earthquake activity. This is Mount Shasta. Let's check this seismograph station. There's the, I actually picked that up quite nicely. That 3.4 in the Battle Creek Fault this morning. This here, it looks like some type of adjustment going on, because there was a blip and then there was a little bit higher amplitude reading and then another blip indicating the end of that. But earthquake activity, there might be a handful of smaller ones there. Then again, these may be the events there on the Battle Creek Fault. That definitely is. That may be some of the twos that are happening. Let me check out another graph here to the north. That one's offline. Oh man, this one's online, but that's not for sure what that is. I don't think it's anything of volcanic nature, because the way it starts off and then ends, it almost looks like something's coming on and then turning off, like a generator or something. This one here is decent. That's the 3.4, the Battle Creek Fault. That looks like maybe a localized event, that little bitty one, but I don't see anything, of the nature that we're seeing up there in the Cascades, as far as Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier go. So just kind of quiet out there for now across Mount Shasta, but we'll keep an eye on it. There's definitely a lot of pressurization going on out here with the Cascadia subduction zone, putting a lot of strain on things. In Idaho, we got a little swarm going on out there as well. This has been it's been an area of interest here recently because of the amount of earthquakes that have happened out here. Just in this area alone, over 100 earthquakes. The largest magnitude being a 3.9, bunch of threes in there. There was really no main quake out here, and this is off on a fault system there near the Idaho and Montana border region. But there is a trail kind of leading up here to Yellowstone, where there's been a handful of earthquakes, but most of the activity's been back over here. Let's go check out Yellowstone here real quick. See if it's working. This one is working. Okay, so that is definitely some earthquake activity. I believe those are the ones in Idaho, or the west of the area here. I'm going to match that time frame. That's just after 8:20 or so last night. Yeah, so that would match it. 8:20, just about 8:19 for a 3.9, and then there was a bunch of twos in there around that same time period. So that is definitely picking up the earthquake activity to the west of here. I don't see anything else really stirring up. A couple of smaller events, but Yellowstone in itself is quiet. There's not a whole lot of earthquake activity there across the current caldera, the Yellowstone caldera right here. But to the west there is. So just a little bit of activity stirring up out here. Oil field still rocking and rolling. Nothing new out there. New Madrid seismic zone, 1 earthquake from yesterday. It looks like a little 2.2. So looking here at the world view, man, there's just, I see 2 rings up here for some reason. I'm guessing there's a little bit of a difference in the data from the USGS and the EMSC, because I believe there was only one 6.1 this morning, but that's still a decent event. And now we got some migrational quake activity here this morning with a 5.1. A little bit further down the line, this area of the Kamchatka Trench here, I don't know if it's got enough strain for a big mega quake out here. It's possible. There's been a little bit of time that has passed, but that section may be getting ready to move. Earthquake underneath Tokyo, Japan from last night, little 4.5. As far as the Nankai Trough goes over here across the south coast of Japan, looks pretty quiet there for now. I don't really see anything showing up on the globe. It's had a lot of activity up north and south, a lot of activity around it recently, and it's just kind of hanging in there. There was a decent swarm to the south here a couple months back, and there was even some last year, which caused the Japan Meteorological Agency to put out a megaquake warning for. So they've increased the odds of seeing a megaquake here on that subduction zone because of the amount of time that has passed, and also the strain that's been building up around it. Philippines area still getting quite a bit of aftershock activity in the 3 and 4 range. Let's see, and then typical clustering going on here across Indonesia. New Zealand down here definitely got some movement happening. There's a 5.2 north here along the Kermadec Trench. Some 3s there across the rest of the plate boundary, but that's pretty active map here for just the last 24 hours. So we got moderate to decent major activity going on here around the globe. West Coast, like I say, we do need to watch that. There's a 4-pointer underneath the Hawaii area last night, but that's associated with a swarm that's been ongoing there. I think they've been studying it since the 70s or 80s. A swarm way underneath the Pahala area. Has something to do with the hotspot area down below, and that can affect the flow and whatnot up to the surface. Right now, the flow is around the Kilauea volcano crater area. We do have a couple earthquakes down here across the lower East Rift Zone. 3 earthquakes, nothing big. But I want to take a look here at the inflation chart, because that can kind of give us clues as to what's going on down below, whether we're getting a recharge of the system up here, or it's going to go somewhere else as far as the magma flow goes. But we're kind of taking a little turn here, not out of the ordinary, but because you can see back in episode number 30, that was 34, I believe. Hard to keep track of all these. It's rinse and repeat cycle. I don't know if it's going to last for much longer like that, but it could change. Could get some blockage going on, or a diversion of the magma somewhere else below. But if you look here, the curvature, we've seen that a little bit there with the episode 34. So unless this goes way down and other areas go way up, then I wouldn't think that we're going to see anything different. So right now we're still on cue to see an eruption here in a number of days here. Sometimes it takes about almost 10 days or so, sometimes longer, 2 weeks or so there. But we'll continue to check back on that. See if there's anything else going on here. Earthquake activity up in Iceland. The Mediterranean region, Turkey area today kind of little on the quiet side. Still got some movement, but no huge swarming going on there across Turkey area for now. There's a 3.1 showing up across the Philippines. So we'll watch it. Definitely looks a little active out there. Let's see what we got here for space weather activity. Well, things are, looks like they finally dropped off there in the KP index, although the high-speed solar wind stream is still a little bit elevated. Flaring activity, a number of M flares here it looks like in the last 24 hours. Nothing major, but we do have this group of sunspots that are currently facing the Earth. Let's see what we got here on the magnetogram image. This one's still offline. Hopefully they get that up and running. A little bit of complexity here with a couple of these sunspots, although this region back over here I believe is flaring as well. And it may be a source of some of this M flare activity here recently. That was an M1.5 here, around 4236. There's a couple filaments out there, but so we'll keep an eye on this. When they're facing Earth, they're more of a concern, because anything that does blast off or pop, in terms of large solar flare activity, is definitely will be geo-effective as it's facing the planet like that. But we do have another massive coronal hole down here, 84. This one's old, over 2 weeks old now. So we got another day, or another couple days here of elevated earthquake activity with this thing facing us. Seems to be stirring up every time we get a decent-sized coronal hole facing the planet. There's your flare threat here for today. 55% chance there for M flare. That's probably reasonable with the sunspots that we have here. 10% for X flare. And aurora activity could continue off and on here. This is just the forecast up here. This is obviously subject to change. Yesterday and the day before, things were really ramping up when the forecast kind of looked like this, so it could obviously change here with the solar wind speed hitting the planet. Let's take a look here at the asteroid list. See if there's anything up here. Check out the next 5 ones. See if there's anything close. This one's pretty close. 53,000 miles there for a newly discovered 44-foot house-sized asteroid. That's coming in today, it looks like. Everything else there millions of miles away, including a pretty big one. But that, even so, this here's that's a decent distance. A fairly small 44-foot. That would make a neat little fireball, I would say, though, if it entered into the atmosphere. As far as severe weather goes, we didn't have any severe weather here last night, but man, that thunder and lightning, it was crazy out here last night. Marginal risk for some severe weather across a couple states there in the west. Nothing for tornado, just it looks like a little bit of wind and maybe some hail threat there. Let's see what we have for the model run. I don't see any hurricane activity entering the Gulf or the eastern portion of the country. Maybe some more moisture there from a tropical system down the road for the desert southwest. And I'll just kind of keep an eye on things out here. I picked up, I think about 3/4 of an inch of rain here overnight. It poured down with the thunderstorms. I don't know if this map's a little old. Yeah, that was from last night when they just started to fire up, but it's kind of neat. I do love thunderstorms here, but when I'm trying to sleep, man, it's not very restful night. All right, have yourself a good one. Enjoy your Friday. We will see you guys back out here for the Friday night update. A couple earthquakes coming into the Russia area right now. Nothing big, but it is seeing some increasing movement, and obviously when things are increasing like that, like we're seeing today, that could be a sign there that we may see something larger here in the area soon. So of course, we'll cover that, jump back on if something happens. Have a good one. We'll see you guys out here for the Friday night update.